Muy buenos días. Muchas gracias a todos y a todas ustedes por asistir a este debate, a esta mesa sobre la importancia del diálogo interreligioso en la Alianza de Civilizaciones. Me presento, me ha pedido...
Mansour Escudero asked me to chair this meeting and participate. I'm Juan José Tamayo, the director of the chair of theology and religions from the Charles III University in Madrid. And I'm here to participate in the debate, in the dialogue, because I think it is one of the most important initiatives that are being taken today within the framework of the Alliance of Civilizations. I'm going to give you a brief introduction to the theme and then pass the floor to the participants. The first idea that I wanted to put forward is that in the world of religions, we are going through a change of paradigm, a change of model in relations. We've moved from the single religion to a universe with many religions. There is not only one single true religion. It never really did exist. But in general, each religion considered itself to be the only real one and were anathema and condemned the other religions. Fortunately, today, it's considered that all religions can be valid routes towards the freedom of humanity. But at the same time, as they are paths that we can move along, they are full of obstacles. So we have to look at religions from a critical point of view. But I think that the most important development over recent decades has been that the pluriverse, rather than the universe at a level of religions, has happened within one region. Historically, religions have focused on one particular territory, and in that area or territory they have become the only religion. But today we no longer need to go to India to learn about Hinduism, neither do we have to go to Libya or Morocco to get to know Islam, but here in our territory, here Cordoba is an emblematic place, but in anywhere in Spain there is a plurality of religions, and I think this is a very important step. So what is the result of this religious plurality, this coexistence? Dialogue. Dialogue is essential, otherwise the past would come back and there would be wars and conflicts. So we have moved then from the culture with a capital C with many cultures with a small c. What does culture with a capital C mean? That it was considered that there was one superior culture, a hegemonic culture, which was developed, and that was the Western culture, and that all the other cultures were inferior cultures. Whereas I think that in the present day, what we are seeing is the phenomenon of cultural plurality. Cultural plurality is not an obstacle, as it might have been seen in the past for coexistence, but it is human wealth. Plurality of cultures is reflected in the great wealth that humanity has. And cultural differences are not reasons for confrontation and conflict, but rather the basis for coexistence. In the midst of this plurality of cultures that exist within one same geographical region, what attitudes exist? Well, there are two. Huntington's conflict of civilizations. I think that if we give free rein to this, the world will become a towering inferno in a question of minutes, because the religions, if they fight each other, are tremendously violent. But of course, the other avenue is the alliance of civilizations. But this dialogue has always existed, because Huntington's theory is not right. There has not always been a conflict of civilizations, a clash of civilizations. There has been coexistence. There isn't one civilization that hasn't been existed by other civilizations. There's not one single culture that can be considered pure. All cultures are fruit of crossbreeding. So if the clash of civilizations is not the answer, because I think that in the history we've seen a clash of economic interests, a clash of occupation of territories, a clash of empires, clash of economies. So what's left? Dialogue. And thirdly, I think we are in the midst of a changing paradigm with regard to spirituality as well. We've moved from a single spirituality specific to each religion, which was not contaminated by others, and we've moved to an inter-spirituality. And these are the most authentic and genuine manifestations of religions. But in addition to this, spirituality belongs to the nature of the human being. It's part of our anthropological makeup. And I think that at the current time, one of the most important elements for coexistence and for this alliance of civilizations is the meeting of spiritualities, be they religious spiritualities or secular spiritualities or ecological spiritualities. So the framework for this, I would like to conclude my framework by saying that we need to reappraise the most important concepts and practices at a political, social, and economical level in our society. And I want to give you three examples: the concept and the practice of democracy, the concept and the practice of citizenship, and the concept and the practice of human rights. Any of these three concepts and of these three practices can no longer be based on the classical model of the state, of the nation state, etc., etc. I think that citizenship, for example, cannot be limited to a territory or a region. It has to be constructed interculturally. Citizen is every person who lives in a specific territory, who works in that territory, and who establishes links and networks in that territory. And citizenship, therefore, goes beyond cultures, goes beyond territorial limits, goes beyond religious limits. The same can be said of the concept of democracy. Democracy is a concept which can not only be understood as being limited to a model of democracy like the representative liberal democracy in the West. It has to be understood in an intercultural fashion. This is a concept and a practice that must be developed in dialogue with other conceptions and with other approaches. And thirdly, of course, the concept and the practice of human rights. It's no longer the idea of human rights as a declaration which has a clearly Western slant based on the Judeo-Christian civilization. This should be reformulated in the context of interfaith and intercultural dialogue. I think this could be a framework that I've tried to give you here to enable us and to debate about the topic that we are here to talk about today, the importance of interfaith dialogue in the Alliance of Civilization. Amongst the participants, the speakers, we have Ahmed Munir from the Halbeti Order in Mexico. On my extreme right here, please understand he's not from the extreme right. He's not even from the right. I had dinner with him last night, and I know he's a wonderful Sufi who's going to tell us about his experience. Secondly, we'll give the floor to Nacho de la Mata on my right. These are all, of course, geographical terms, not political terms. Now, Nacho de la Mata is going to take the floor on behalf of the Church of San Carlos Borromeo. Now, this is a very intercultural, the most intercultural name of the Catholic churches that there are in the world at the moment. Then, in third place, we're going to give the floor to Mr. Abdenur Prado, who is the president of the Islamic Council in Catalonia and who's been working on this issue for many years now. He presides over the Islamic feminist conferences that have been held in Barcelona since 2005. And finally, I have also been asked to speak to talk about a proposal for Islamic Christian liberation theology. Thank you very, very much, everybody. Good morning, everybody. In practice of the interfaith dialogue that is being carried out in Mexico, we have learned a form of greeting which is inclusive, and I'd like to start with that. I'd like to say to all of you that I honor the time, the dedication that you have given to being here. I honor your country, that I honor what you love, and I profoundly honor the here and now in which we find ourselves together. And from that honor, I would like to say that I can now speak from my community, from my country, and from something which is as deep as is my humanity, my basic humanity, my heart. Recognition of the diversity between faiths may manifest itself in two ways, from sociological, historical, political, economical analysis of the difference, or it may start from a more fundamental stance, from the intrinsic dignity of each human being. And we have chosen this second attitude. And what I'm going to talk about is the fundamental basis. The fundamental basis is that for us who are Sufis and people from same Peacemaker International Peacemakers, which is an interfaith group that we belong to and that we work with in Mexico, the main principle, our starting point and our ending point really, is the intrinsic dignity of the human being in each person. And this is where we start our dialogue, and this is what we base ourselves on, the basic foundation, which is human dignity. And it's not only us who's saying this. Rahman al-Rahim, the messenger manifests the truth that has been revealed to him, as do people of faith. The heart of every believer opens to Allah and to the angels of Allah, and their perfect revelations and the messengers who are depositories and have been sent to every spiritual nation. These faithful do not distinguish between the messengers of divine love, and they say, we listen and we obey. Concede us your forgiveness, Allah, and to whom all the love of our hearts is directed. You are the objective of and the essence of our being. Allah proves our soul beyond its capacity. Every soul bears its own failings. You who appreciate our heart, do not leave us in states of forgetfulness or error. So the human being can enter into states of forgetfulness or error, and we do this all the time. But to say that somebody different from me is in himself or herself an error is wrong. Or to see that I am an error is strange, of course. So the basis is this. Another point in interfaith dialogue is that we understand that people can be in states of, but not be intrinsically wrong. We are what God has given us, and that is to be his representatives in creation, at one with him. Here are the human beings, there is God. That is different. So the basis of dialogue is the recognition of the states that we can go through. I want to say the words of my master, because when you honor your masters, knowledge that is transmitted is alive. You don't take control or appropriate knowledge. Knowledge can't be the property of anybody in interfaith dialogue. When you assume the holy word or the word of your masters as your own, you take over rights about other people, and what happens here is that you are appropriating words that are not yours. Another basis of interfaith dialogue is to not appropriate the word of God, of course. Sheikh Noor, my master, says, the mind is not capable of seeing reality except for with the eyes of the heart. We are not mere spectators, but we communicate with this new humanity. In this Islamic mystery of the perfect man, there is no allocation of fixed senses. There's no distinction of race, gender, nationality, religion, class, or caste in this family of the conscience, which is the divine consciousness. There are several different branches. God is not revealed as lightning in history, in creation, but creation is revealed in God, in the transformation of the bud which is flowering, of the caterpillar into a butterfly, of the coal into diamonds. The final meaning of Islam or universal peace is not superimposed by personalities or religions, but rather introduced directly through the perfect man, palpable in each heart. In this mystic union, we can see the saga of the imprint of the perfect man, repeating with every breath, Allah, Allah, your presence surprises me and converts me into a diamond. These are the transcendental qualities of God, and apart from that, nothing else really exists. These qualities are divine energies which exercise all the energy of the universe. These divine attributes are the real nature of man, or of Muhammad alayhi salam in his final stage of culmination, which is Islam. So, another point of the interfaith dialogue is Islam. Is Islam seriously something different from the Word of God revealed in the Torah? Is it something different from God manifested in Buddhist nations? Is it something different from the experience of prayer, of the prayer of the Confucians, something different from the devotion of the Hare Krishna, something different from me? God has done something different to himself. I reveal my soul. Are souls different? They are and they are not. We can honor the difference, but we can also honor above all things the plan of God for each human being and for each people and for each nation. What are our interfaith experiences in Mexico then? Under this framework, our children, our Muslim children, meet the children of our Hare Krishna, of our Jewish brothers, and what we're doing now is to teach children about the different sacred traditions. So the Jewish children go to have a drink and to talk and play. They go to a mosque to do this, and the Hare Krishna children go and play and share prayer with a Zen temple. So this is an interpractical dialogue, because the person who is who practices a religion doesn't have really words to share with others, but rather life, moments, experiences. The interfaith dialogue that doesn't transmit life is not interfaith dialogue. It's theology, but it's not experience. It's not the Muslim with the light coming through his window. It's not the Buddhist after the shamatha, the tranquility of mind as a pure mirror. It's not the Catholic in the Oaxaca Sierra on a pilgrimage taking food. These are the experiences that we can share with each other from the person who practices each religion. These structures dialogue with each other. That's fine. The world will be a little bit better. But the world of politics, because the world of the soul has its own logic. I believe this is the case. So I'm not going to go into any further detail, but I would just like to tell you that at the current time in Mexico, what we are doing is working, my master, Raquel Shorla, she's Jewish, and she has taken this new systemic philosophy of Hellinger, who is a German who is dealing with aspects in deep, such as he's working in Palestine, he's working with Germans who were victims of the Holocaust. And I'd like to give you a little description of this. Hellinger was an minister, Catholic minister. This signifies peace. Peace means that what was previously in opposition is brought together. There's mutual recognition of what was previously excluded, what was previously fought, and what wanted to destroy each other. Now we bring together the victims of each side and talk about the pain that was inflicted. What does peace do? Those who place themselves above others and consider them as enemies and of lesser worth can recognize them as their equal. They value what each has that is special. They take and receive. Peace between them widens its personal base and limits, allowing for diversity and idiosyncrasies of each. This peace starts in the soul. What we had rejected in the past, what we had rejected of ourselves in the past, what we had discriminated and what we had marginalized of ourselves now may take its place. We recognize its significance, its consequences, and its contribution to our growth, and we even grow to love it. Love what is excluded. To love. This means that we are leaving the ideal of innocence, which doesn't request or exist. So we come out of our ivory tower, which prefers to suffer instead of acting, which prefers to remain as a child instead of growing. I would like to end by talking about somebody who grew too much and who's reached 800 years anniversary of his birth. There wasn't a lot of contact with him. This is Maestro Rumi, 800 years. What should be done, Muslims? Because I don't recognize myself in my being. I'm not a Christian, I'm not a Jew, I'm not Gabra, I'm not a Muslim. I'm not from the East or the West. And I'm not from the earth, I'm not from the sea. I'm not from nature, I'm not from the circular skies. I'm not from the water, the air, the fire. I'm not from the epidemic, I'm not from the dust, from the existence. I'm not from China, I'm not from India, I'm not from Bulsa, I'm not from Sakim, I'm not from the kingdom of Kayam. I'm not from this world, I'm not from the next world, I'm not from from paradise, I'm not from hell, I'm not from Adam or Eve or Reden or Iswa. My place is the no place. My imprint is the non-imprint. There's no body or soul because I belong to the soul of the loved one. I have left duality aside. I've seen that the two worlds are just one world. And I seek the one, I call the one. He is the first, the last, what is visible, what is internal. I don't know anything if it's not him, he who is. I am bewitched by the glass of love. If once in my life I spend a moment without you, Allah, from that moment I am sorry about my life. I repent of my life. And if I will find two worlds, and this will be a triumph forever. And I accept. I do not. Thank you very much for your attention.
Ahora, muchas gracias por esta excelente y cálida.
Thank you for such a warm speech, Mahmoudin. You have placed us in that beyond of any structure or organization, and that perhaps facilitates interreligious dialogue more than anything else. Now we'll listen to Nacho de la Mata. He's a lawyer, and he works every day with a problem stemming from a popular district in Madrid, such as Entrevías, and around the parish church of St. Carlos Borromeo. He will tell to us about the experience he's got there, which has got a lot to do with interreligious dialogue. Good morning to everyone. My name is Nacho de la Mata, and like Juanjo said, one of the things I do is to work as a lawyer, specifically with foreign minors, especially coming from the Maghreb. And this work I developed currently couldn't be understood without making any references to the parish church of St. Charles Borromeo. It is a parish church located south from Madrid at the district of Entrevías. It is a parish church which was born exclusively with a vocation to work with marginalized groups of people. A specific priest, Enrique de Castro, was commissioned with a specific space in that district dedicated to work with those which are the victims of social injustice. And from that framework, the parish church started evolving, specifically from the gospel, trying to bring it closer to those who were victims of exclusion and who had been rejected by all those churches at which they had been, the churches they had approached, the most deprived people, and the ones which who had been rejected by the usual churchgoers of those other districts. And these children or youngsters who were approaching the parishes in order to get some help needed a place like this parish church so they could leave their problems with some support at that moment. And I will focus on two things. The experience we had when at the church we decided to host immigrants which were just outdoors, which were homeless. We hosted some 60 of them, and then I will tell you about my experience as a lawyer in the environment of immigrant minors. From that framework, at the parish church of St. Charles Borromeo, at a specific moment, the flows of immigrants and foreign minors suddenly led us to see that we just did not have enough resources. There were too many of them. So in the end, we decided to open the doors of the church as the initial place for some basic needs they had to be covered, at least for them to have a place where to sleep and food and something to eat. So all of us who were related to the parish had to be involved in the problem of marginalization because they didn't have even a place for them to take care of their basic needs. And that meant for us to open ourselves in personal and global terms, to open ourselves to them. And in that framework, most of the people there were coming from Morocco or from the Maghreb. And when we were celebrating gospel on Sundays, we couldn't just forget about the people who were there and were taken care of by the parish, and their own religious beliefs should be respected, so they could find some room for their own religious culture to have their place. So suddenly we saw that while celebrating Mass, we had also to take care of people from many other religions, and we thought of a way for us all to share both religious and non-religious aspects. So our celebrations turn into something very beautiful, because beside the Gospel we had the Quran, and we could express, every one of us could read the books and share our vital experience, to show our conflicts and use of dialogue, of permanent dialogue, as a channel to show what we had inside. And that wasn't a problem at all. It just enriched us very much. That from that moment of coming together, we still have many ties. We found a space beyond the mere space of the church where we could meet like human beings, and where we could put on the table our conflicts and become involved. And it was from personal mutual involvement that we could overcome any kind of barriers and understand each other in any environment, because we focus on personal involvement from the problems we share every day, and that led to many different situations. And many of us hosted people in our own homes who were homeless, and we shared our homes, our food, our experiences. We learned how to live together. We learned mutual respect and create a common culture. And from the world of respecting the otherness, to create new spaces where we could make together in care and in the overcoming of the problems and conflicts we were coming through. In 2003, we started to know, and as we have a very close relationship with children and teenagers, we started to know suddenly that when we met them in streets and when we started working in the streets with them, they started saying, well, a friend of mine was brought away in a plane, and they are bringing them back to their countries. Well, we had a problem, which was language, but there were many minors who helped us to contact those who had been expatriated. And then we came on to the subject of the human rights of foreign minors. And we were saying that they were being expatriated. And foreign minors came to our parish church and also to our homes. And from that point on, and also with the help of other colleague lawyers, we became involved in the subject of minors, of foreign minors, because they were telling us the needs, the problems. They were placing their lives in our hands. They were assuming a bigger risk than us. And when we opened our homes, we thought that perhaps we were risking our own lives, but truly they were the ones running the risk. And that's when we started working in legal terms on the subject. What happened then? Well, that in 2003, we realized this problem of the repatriation of foreign minors. We denounced before some institutions this violation of human rights, and we found a big echo. We had to intervene, the children and teenagers and ourselves, in order to help them stay with us. That's what they wanted. So we set up a kind of association with social workers, lawyers, etc., in order to see how we could approach the problem. And finally, we involved many people, and with legal tools, we managed to bring out from those planes many of those teenagers and children. Within this framework, we have discovered many things. Many things. In the framework of foreign minors, we discovered that minors are questioning the immigration policy, because as they are minors, they should be protected, and that's just in international agreements. And as they should be protected, the public institutions should put in place the means, the resources for that protection to be true. And when a minor comes to us, the protection is essential. They have to be protected at all levels. And foreign minors question freedom of movement because protection gave them access to documents, to information, and they should be treated like a regular citizen because they were minors, and they should be documented, and they should reach their
No se acepta esta realidad desde el mundo
of majority with a residence permit and become integrated in society. And minors are treated like an irregular adult. The fact that minors enter our borders turns them into just irregular immigrants. They are treated like an irregular adult, not like a protected minor, and that was taught to us by the children. And what did happen? They were treated. They were treated like irregular minors. They were repatriated. It is a tool which the state uses in order to control immigration flows. And also we have the issue of documents, of their papers. After spending several years in the protection system and receiving some education, some training for their integration, they reached the majority of age with no documents. And the public institutions wouldn't give them any papers, any documents, because they wouldn't admit their entry and reaching their 18 years in a regular situation. So the treatment given to them was that of an adult. Or on the other hand, if they haven't been repatriated, they were left in an irregular situation. Considering that fear, and the fear for them to reach that age without any resources for them to satisfy their own needs, is that we started this movement. And as I was saying, we find ourselves discussing while new conflicts are appearing. and we touch both the material conflicts they might come across and also the spiritual needs. And this group led us to discover that communication, care, allow us to meet each other at very many different levels, not just at the religious scale. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Nacho.
Thank you, Nacho. I think you use a word which should be very much present in our minds, which is the word care or love, which is the key for a true integration and an adequate coexistence in religious and cultural and social diversity. And now I want to give the floor to Atenur Prado, who's the president of the Islamic Committee of Catalonia. He's written a book within the collection of the books of the Islamic Committee, which I think is very outstanding. It is called Islam in Democracy. He refers in his book to interreligious dialogue and its relation to tradition.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Quiero dar las gracias a los.
I want to thank the organizers for having invited me and for the opportunity they've given me to be with you all. Also want to thank World Islamic People's Leadership, to which I want to dedicate my speech. I want to be very precise, very brief. I don't think any of you will have to listen to a sweetened view of interreligious dialogue as something which can bridge the gaps between hypothetical civilization. This doesn't mean that I don't think it's something quite important, but also there are some points of view which are very dangerous because they in their baseline, they take for granted that there is a conflict among civilizations, and that also that these civilizations have a one-way relationship with some religions. We've got to be very careful with a critical acceptance of a series of premises which are of postulates which are unacceptable. We cannot refer to religion as something which is associated to a specific territory, a specific culture. There are members of the different religions who belong to very different cultures. I'm an European in cultural terms, but I'm a Muslim. So if we talk about a clash of civilization or an alliance of civilizations, and we refer to Islam as something in the Middle East, I don't know what to do with myself because I'm none of those things. So we are really having to refer to a new collective paradigm, and with the emergence of a new civil society at global scale, a civil society which is the only one which can affront the challenges that lay ahead of us, globalization and all this system of the uprooting of the peoples of the earth. It is a transnational system which calls us to overcome the traditional forms of political participation. So I see interreligious dialogue as an example of the raising of that new civil society. During the years I've been involved in the subject and following my contact with my Muslim, Buddhist, Christian, atheist brethren, I see that this interreligious dialogue is a part of this emergence, and I think it is time for those who postulate themselves as the leaders or the representatives of the great traditions of mankind, they assume to its last consequences what this interreligious dialogue means, not just as a dialogue among hierarchies which only want to control their people, but as a rupture with a series of sectarian or exclusivist elements which became encroached into the different religions. My speech means tradition and interreligious dialogue, because interreligious dialogue is an essential part of the different religious traditions, as it can be traced back to the great traditions of mankind, not just in religious terms, but also because we can come across examples of dialogue, and also in a spiritual sense. When I refer to interreligious dialogue as a tradition, I'm not just talking about the existence of past examples of interreligious dialogue, but to the fact that the great and sacred traditions of mankind stem from a spiritual experience which involves the overcoming of some states of duality, and it means a coming together with the unique source of everything which has been created, and the overcoming on all conceptual barriers. And that's where we can find the essence of that which can make it possible for all human beings to meet each other, independently of any subjective perspectives we might have of ourselves. Dialogue is a paradigm of spiritual experience, because if the essential questions are not made, this experience cannot be felt. If you don't invoke the one who's beyond everything which can be seen. Spiritual experience predisposes to dialogue, and as all religious traditions stem from a spiritual experience, all of them have that seed of the meeting. If I refer to the Quran, you can realize the level of presence of interreligious dialogue in history. I could spend an hour just referring to surahs of the Quran. I'm just going to quote some 3 or 4 for you to see how this interreligious dialogue is clear. Sacred Quran says, we have given to each community different ways of adoring God. So pluralism is already taken into account. Second, all revealed religions are legitimate ways for salvation. And of course, those who believe in this divine writing, Christians, Jewish and Sabians, all those who believe in Allah and in the last day of judgment, will have their reward together with their God and have nothing to fear, nor to lament. And all these different ways of praying have got to do with successive revelations. The Quran says within the heart of each community we have given raise to a message. And he says that all prophets have the same level before the eyes of God, and he exhorts the Muslim to believe in all revealed traditions. We believe in Allah and on that who made to descend for us and also for Abraham, Israel, Jacob, and on that Jesus and Moses received from the holder, and we give ourselves to him. The message of the Quran places us in what Islamic tradition referred to as the transcendent unit of traditions, Wahad ad-Din, the unity of religions. You're different in the form and practice, but similar in their essence. There's a Khalid tradition from a prophet which is contained in the books by Muhammad, saying that prophets are brothers and children of different mothers, but the religion is one, just one. I think no one can find clear words. And starting from this ontological reality, any dispute, any theological dispute is turned absurd. Reducing, limiting interreligious dialogue to theological discussion is rendered absurd. But we are aware that the more we go away from that unique source of everything what's been created, the human being tends to highlight differences with the consequences this has in terms of quarreling, just looking for differences above that unity which is always lying in the background. The possibility of opposing our own beliefs to those of others is open, and it's very curious because the Quran says us in different versicles how to deal with that. I'm not going to quote them all because there are many, but there's just one of them which is very beautiful. The Sacred Quran says, "And do not discuss with the followers of prior revelations, but with in the most pleasant manner, unless they are those who want to do evil. And do say, we believe in that what has been made to descend upon us, and also in that which has been made to descend on you, because your God and our God is the same, and we are subject to them." And that's the answer any Muslim should give to anyone trying to discuss on Islam or the differences among religions, etc. When we
Al mismo tiempo, cuando miramos hacia la tradición islámica, hacia la larga historia del Islam,
we also look into the tradition of Islam, we find very subtle examples of such an attitude among Muslims. We've been talking these days about Al-Andalus, but not just about it, but we also find other things, and that's why I wanted to refer to tradition and turning points.
La tradición islámica, especialmente tanto encontramos
Islamic tradition. In Islamic tradition, we can find two elements at which interreligious dialogue, the way we are presenting it, and as related to this new paradigm, involves a breakage, a rupture. Many traditionalist theologists have established on the sides of this message of Quran. They always talked about the supremacy of Quran and the message of Muhammad over the rest. May the peace be with all them. But within Islamic tradition, we find discourses saying that even if all the books revealed before the Quran were books sent by God, the Quran is gone over all them, and they are rendered no valid anymore, and that the rest are infidels just for not being Muslims. And on the second place, we see that traditionally lawmakers of the classic period of Islam elaborated a regime for religious minorities, and even if this system of minorities in the Islamic world was no doubt a big improvement and even a model on how to deal with the subject of religious minorities, today we realize that it is something which is outdated and which includes a series of discriminations which cannot be justified if we want to really follow the spirit of the egalitarian message of Islam. These are two key and clear aspects at which interreligious dialogue, current interreligious dialogue we're living through, involves a critical attitude towards Islamic tradition, and also involves, to a certain extent, a rupture with this tradition.
La clave de
The key of this rupture, from my perspective, is the following. In one way or another, we can't make the salvation or any concept of liberation depend on any kind of historical element. We have to state, as Ahmed Munir said at the beginning, that this is not from sociology or history, but rather from the intrinsic dignity of the human being is the only place where this interfaith dialogue can be based. This is humanism, to think that every human being in himself, in herself, is a creature created by Allah with the capacity for love, for transcendence, in whose heart Allah deposited that seed and that potentiality to move towards the light. Every human being, because they are a creature of Allah, has that desire, that desire within him or her, and should try to materialize it in a specific situation, in his or her here and now, from his or her culture, from the situation that he or she finds himself in. Most of us learn to walk, everybody learns to walk within a culture. And we must think that within a specific culture, a specific religion, a specific context, we don't have the possibility given by Allah to be transcendent, is limiting. If we think that, we are limiting the mercy of Allah, which really reaches every human being. Every religion has rights, mechanisms, instruments for the liberation of the human being. It depends on each of us to use these mechanisms, these resources that Allah has given us to achieve this liberation. But belonging to one religion doesn't really mean anything. In itself, it hasn't got any significance. If we do this, we're converting the resource, which is religion or tradition, into an end in itself. And when we change a resource, which is a present from Allah, when we convert this into an end in itself, and an element that defines our identity in confrontation with other identities, we are transforming this mechanism, this gift that Allah has given us, into an idol. Interfaith dialogue is, in many senses, as far as I'm concerned, a mechanism which leads us to the combat all forms of religious sectarianism, to combat this reification or idol worship that many believers have with regard to their own religion, the political idea as well of religions that say that their religion is incompatible with other religions, against those who try to assert their religions as superior over others. To maintain the alliance of civilizations on the one hand, but maintain discriminatory legislation is hypocrisy. If we talk about ecumenism and then meet with other people with the sole aim of trying to convert them is hypocrisy. Talking about the alliance of civilizations, but at the same time trying to maintain supremacy of one's culture is hypocrisy. And speaking of the alliance of civilizations, but maintain a system of exclusion of certain citizens in the nation-state, as the first speaker said, is also hypocrisy. I think that interfaith dialogue is not a whim, and neither can we let it become an issue for the clergymen or the church and religious hierarchy. The Alliance of Civilization should lead us to exclude all elements that promote exclusion and to look and consider the believers of all religions as human beings who are capable of transcendence and who are not an abstraction. Muslims, Christians, Jews, atheists, what does that mean? It doesn't mean anything. As if all Jews, all Christians, all Muslims, all atheists were all the same amongst themselves and different one from another. As though they all had the same ideas or responded to a single pattern. At the same time, interfaith dialogue serves to exorcise our fears, or the fears of certain religious hierarchies when facing this situation, when facing globalization. Fear of relativism, which is a word which is highly criticized in today's world, but it's just a synonym for pluralism. The critique of relativism by many religious hierarchies simply means rejection of multicultural and multi-faith societies. Fear of freedom, the freedom of each human being to choose their own spiritual path and to live that from his or her own heart and capacity for understanding it. Fear of freedom to interpret and freedom to experience within the different traditions. The fact that there are not any real entities called the Muslims, the Jews, the Christians, etc., but rather millions of human beings who seek to live and experience their spirituality in accordance with their capacity to do so in a specific historical context, in a specific socio-cultural context. Fear of acculturation, of the acculturation, of breaking and destroying this historical identity between one specific culture and religion, as though culture and religion and tradition and spirituality were totally different things. This is, of course, not the case. And above all, fear of going beyond the conceptual limits, the ideological limits that have been established between or built up between different traditions. And that's why some hierarchies, of course, they're not all the same, but certain religious hierarchies give this a lot of importance because they are afraid, because they feel that they represent tradition. So they give more importance to dogmas rather than real experience of the believers. The need that some people feel to establish clear and precise limits between the different religions so that the Muslim believer has to feel different just because he is a Muslim from the Christian believer or the Jewish believer. Fear to break or to go beyond the idea of religion understood as a barrier which separates some people from others. I think if we bring these fears to the fore and recognize them, it will help us to see the therapeutic nature of interfaith dialogue, because it helps us to go beyond this superiority complex that some members of some religions would seem to have. A person who feels that his religion is superior to other religions doesn't realize that religion is not something that is closed and finished, but it's an instrument that one has to experience. So what does superiority mean in this sense if a religion is just an instrument that has been given by Allah for the liberation of the human being placed at the service of others? And that's all. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Abdenur, for this talk in which you have established the territory for interfaith dialogue between tradition and rupture. I just wanted to say that we have the opportunity to have a representative of Mauritania with us. He is going to come here to the panel. He's going to take the floor. We would need somebody to translate from French. Taking advantage of the fact that he is here, I think it would be very interesting for him to talk to us. And if there's anybody who's interested in asking him a question, then he can reply to it.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. أولا أبدأ بالشكر الذين قدموا لنا الدعوة.
Perdón, pero es la primera vez traduzco.
This is the first time I've translated directly. He's thanking the organizers for having invited him. I'm going to try. Please bear with me. I'm very happy to be here in Spain with the Spaniards, with the teachers who have presented these wonderful talks. Thank God for being here in Spain and in Al-Andalus and in Cordoba, which is the marvel of the world. Greetings to all of you who are here. And also we have to remember those who came before and the souls of all the people who have lived here before in the past. And also those who were at the basis of the civilization, of human civilization. And I want to say a very simple thing about civilization and individuals. And they say there's a new definition which states that the merging of civilizations, the alliance of civilization, and before alliance, before talking about alliances, we have to know all the civilizations and be close. Dialogue between civilizations, and we also have to know these civilizations. And we have to know each other, and we have homework to do there in this field. And we all have homework to do on each side. If we are going to use the term dialogue, then this means that two people, two sides have to speak. But it's a pity that there are people who think that one side only has to speak and the other side has to listen. For example, the United States, because they say that one side has to speak and the other side has to listen and do. And there's only one side who is supposed to speak in this idea of dialogue. But we have to think about everybody, not this one-sided dialogue with one person speaking and the other side listening. At the beginning, we have to admit that there are many civilizations. And we have to, as good Muslims, before we speak to other cultures, we have to speak amongst ourselves. We understand, as Allah said, that He wants one nation, one world, one community. In general, we have common things. There are common elements between us all. And each civilization follows according to each civilization develops according to each civilization. If it always follows its values, will survive more. But if it abandons its values and its legacy, it will come to an end quickly. For example, justice and love and freedom, peace, freedom, patience, If we're going to talk about dialogue between civilizations, each civilization should mention what the best thing that it has to offer. But there are no problems about taking the best part of each civilization. It doesn't matter whether it's not our civilization, we can take it from others. The most important thing is that we should take the best from everywhere. As Muslims, we have to try to be fair and do justice in everything. And this is very, very important. And the evidences of this in the Quran are frequent. For example, there are 3 ayahs in the Quran which have 15 words. 3 ayahs in the Quran which have 15 words. And in those 15 words, there are 5 that talk about justice, that mention justice. This is very difficult to translate the Quran. Every civilization has values which are the most important, and each civilization has the obligation to show them. In the case of justice, it is a need in all societies. Justice in the Quran, in the Sunnah, and in the life of every Muslim is an objective which is inalienable. And there is a lot of proof of this. There's a lot of proof, but I have chosen 3 ayahs from the Quran. Ayahs which many Muslims memorize. Ayahs which contain 15 words, 5 of which refer to justice, adla. He raised heaven and established the balance, the scales of justice. And establish the scales with fairness, which is a synonym of justice. And do not corrupt the scales. And establish the earth is for the whole of humanity, for all live beings. And the earth is for the whole of humanity. The earth is the heritage or the legacy of the whole of humanity. This is the conception of the Muslims and the Quran. Justice and equality. And this is the common legacy shared by the whole of humanity. Justice is an objective. When Muslims were persecuted in Mecca and they decided to emigrate, the place that the Prophet told them to go to was Ethiopia, Abyssinia. Because there was a king who was fair and just. Nobody was subjected to injustice because he chose a Christian and the Muslim is fair, dispenses justice and receives justice with a sense of equality. Islam flourishes where justice is established. Many of those who reached Islam, who took up Islam, it was because of this idea of justice. The Hajj is a basis, a wide basis in this religion. It is an objective that should be sought at every moment, to be fair and just with others, with your immediate circle and with yourself. Beyond the Quran, as the Quran orders us, Allah orders the justice and the perfection. This Ihsan goes beyond justice. It's the perfection in doing good. Adl is very, very important in Islam. If we are not to be separated from reality, here in Spain, the system is democratic, and it is a state of the rule of law exists. And this is what the whole of humanity wants, especially Muslims. And Muslims have to learn to take advantage and to learn from this situation of justice and to teach about justice, which is part of the Islamic message, and establish the hurdle in their own beings and learn from the situation of justice in their surroundings, in their environment. Well, this aspect could be spoken about for a long time. We could say the same about peace, because all nations need peace. Everybody needs peace. The economy needs a situation of peace. Religion needs peace. Politics needs peace. For all important civilizations, peace plays a central role. Although I would dare to say in the Islamic civilization, this has a special importance because our greeting is peace. And in our conscience, in our consciousness and in our culture, the first thing Adam said was Salam Alaikum. And the Jannah, paradise, is the home of peace. Salam in the life of a Muslim is peace. Peace with oneself, peace with one's surroundings, peace with the environment, peace with those who surround us. As the Prophet recommends, we should try to expand peace. We don't deny that this is a desire and it is something that all peoples want. But this special place given to peace by Islam, I feel, would be difficult to equate it with the place given to peace by other religions. And these considerations about peace can also be applied to mercy. I would just like to quote the example that all the chapters of the Quran start with and Rahman Rahim is very, very difficult to translate. Because there's a hyperbole of Rahman Ibrahim. Rahim is 1 degree more than Rahman. Sensitivity. It's more than Rahman. And I could continue and continue on freedom, talking about freedom. But in the Quran, in addition to this, we don't only have these values, but there is a balance between all these values, in the sense that there is no preponderance or priority given to one of these values over the other. There can't be an imbalance. No, we don't place freedom above justice. Again, this would be another topic for debate. And Islam has a lot to contribute to humanity in this sense. And from the point of view of realism, from a realistic point of view. And Islam is a model for relations with others, because it's respect, and respect for the holy world of the other, of our neighbor, is enormous. Khadim.
There are two things. What's sacred is divided into two things. The sacred places. Not the places, but what's sacred. What's sacred for the other is sacred for myself. For example, in the case, Jesus, the child of Mary, the Gospels, the Torah, these are sacred for them and also for us. There are things which are sacred for the other, but which are not sacred for ourselves. The case of idols. We do not have to insult the idols of others. We are forbidden to insult the idols in order to safeguard peace, even if for us idols have no value. For example, the adoring of stones, but you shouldn't despise them in order not to hurt sensitivities and safeguard peace. And there should always... I'm sorry if I have stopped a little bit the process that the roundtable was following, and even if it was not on Dialogue of Civilizations, but rather on his education process he's developing. Because education, everything we're talking about is very important, but should be channeled through education. And specifically, they're trying to build a city for education in Mauritania, the Zarbia city. Inshallah, during the next meetings, I'll be able to talk to you about that city. And for the sake of justice, wants to respect the time of the rest, time which was given to the rest.
Bueno, muchas gracias al Sheikh de Mauritania. Y ahora me gustaría...
I would like to thank the Sheikh of Mauritania, and I would like the organizers to tell us what we do, because we're out of time completely. I don't know if I've got to speak or not say anything else. Yeah, well, I think we'll be having a coffee. And we'll have the dialogue later on. So, I'm just going to say a couple of words to tell you something, to make a proposal for you, a proposal I'm working on together with other theologists, which is a proposal from my own theological reflection. And I will talk about it within a certain stream of theology, which is the theology of liberation. I'm sure when you listen to this expression, the theology of liberation, you think of the place where this current was born, which is Latin America. And it seems, it might seem for you that this theory only exists in the Christian world, in the Western world, and in the environment of just the poorest. So it is thought that liberal dimensions and emancipatory dimensions are not to be found in other religions or in other cultures. It seems that outside Christendom, Christianity, and outside the Western world, we would be witnesses to the lack of justice and idolatry, and that it would be only in Christian traditions that this freedom of the individual should be found. And like outside Christian theology, salvation could not be possible. This becomes even more complicated if we talk about Islam, because it is not that there's an Islamic liberation, but that through the minds of the Western citizens or Christians or the Catholic, no space would be to think that there are discourses, proposals, and liberating statements within Islam. And it's very much fixed in social imaging. It is said with Huntington that Islam is the most intolerant and belligerent civilization of the three monotheistic religions. And this is a statement which cannot stand just a review of texts. A German Catholic theologist has studied the phenomenon of violence within the Hebrew Bible, what we refer to about the Old Testament. I don't like to refer to it as something of the past with no current value, but rather about the Jewish or Hebrew Bible. And Schwager showed an example of how there are more than 1,000 texts which link Yahweh, God, with violence. And it's still been said and identified, and Islam is identified with violence. And it is not just Islam which is linked to violence, but it is closely the Prophet and his project, his liberation project, and his praying is related to violence. Even Pope Benedict XVI, at a very unfortunate discourse he pronounced in his own hometown on the 12th of September 2006, said that, of course, quoting a Persian wise man. And he was saying Muhammad didn't contribute with anything of new to mankind. He imposed faith through the sword, and he said even more that the God of Islam was like something different from the Christian or Jewish God, which is quite that would be like referring to three gods. There's just one God, and the God of Islam would be a God not moving within rationalism. It would only be the Christian God which would move in the level of rationalism. So with this concept of Islam, like violent or belligerent religion, you cannot build a liberating discourse. And the same could be said of that idea, which is quite widespread, of fundamentalism. There's a direct relationship in the minds of people, at least in the environment I know, and even among cultured people. They make close ties or links between fundamentalism and Islam. So talking about Islam is talking about fundamentalism for them. But see what happens here in the cultured world and in the world of Spanish. That link, which is spontaneously established between Islam and fundamentalism, between fundamentalism and Islam, has been brought to the dictionary of Spanish of the Spanish Royal Academy of the language. You can see into the internet the 22nd edition of the dictionary, a dictionary which is made by academics not just from Spain but from all Spanish-speaking countries. So you go to the word fundamentalism and it says fundamentalism is got three variants. You don't know which is the first one. It is linked to is Islam, a current inside Islam which tries to impose its beliefs even violently to a whole of our society. The second variant, a religious Christian current which was started in the second decade of the 20th century in the United States. And that's the second variant. Fundamentalism was not born in Islam. Fundamentalism was of Christian origin in the Protestant Pentecostal world of the United States. And the third variant says is that intolerant attitude which tries to impose the ideas of someone on others, even resorting to violent means. And then, well, let alone telling you the relationship established between Islam and patriarchy. If there's a religion which is identified to machism and patriarchal discourse is Islam. So talking about Islam means talking about discrimination and marginalization of women. And with this tissue, it is very difficult to build a Islamic Christian theology of liberation. And the title itself, which is given to conferences, Islam and the Western world, is that title is already demonizing Islam. And that load does not correspond to reality. And it's like as if we were talking about something which is like two worlds apart, and that's not what history tells us. From the 7th century and in Spain up to the 8th century and the 16th century, the end of the 15th century, the relationship between the West and Islam was a very fluent relationship. It was a dynamic communication. It was a very enriching contact. So if we, I'm going to give you a very clear example of this relationship. How could we divide the history of Spain? We could divide it into 4 periods: Roman Spain, Visigoth Spain, Muslim Spain, and the other Spain, the monarchic Spain, because despite 2 very small periods, it was a monarchy. Out of the 4 periods of the history of Spain, do you know which is the most plural, rich, tolerant period, and even the longest from the cultural and political point of view? The Muslim Spain, from the year 711 up to 1492, which is 781 years, and it is only starting at that date, 1492, is that hostility started between the relationship between the Islam and the Western world. And what can we see from that moment on? You know it very well. Europe which thinks of itself as the hegemonic culture, as the discoverer of all discoveries, has a messianic conscience and wants to transmit to the Eastern countries what they have discovered. And then we have that phenomenon, that of colonialism. And colonialism, in fact, is the imposition by force of a culture which is considered to be superior. The colonization is a clear example that the colonizing culture is inferior to the colonized culture because it doesn't establish the respect deserved by the autochthonous culture. And from that moment on, you know perfectly well what happens. The Arab world, the Arab language, are considered to be languages and worlds of underdevelopment, of and English, German would be the languages of culture, illustration, development, and of course with these forms of thinking it is impossible to understand the making of a Islamic Christian theory of liberation. And that's the moment when we may start thinking of that change in paradigm in the last 30, 40 years following the dialogue among cultures and religions. And I think that former model, demonizing model, is being overcome steadily. And at least in the field of theology, where I'm usually work, many theologists like me, who come from the Western and Christian world, are aware that for liberation all cultures are needed and all religions are needed. Thus, that we're working around that project of an intercultural theology, interreligious theology of liberation. It is a theology, of course, and it's a counter-hegemonic
de una manera radical
theory which will contest the supremacy of the Western world in the Christian world. And with that, I'm finishing, which would be the contents, the fundamental course of that Islamic Christian theology of liberation. The first content, which links us to theologies from these or that religion, is the element of content, God, the word God. And the most important thing here is to highlight that the three religions, Judaism, Christianism, and Islam, are monotheistic, but not of metaphysic kind. I'm saying Yahweh, just using the Hebrew name, that the God of Jesus of Nazareth, and Allah, when they talk about themselves, their prophets will tell you knowing God means practicing justice. So that's why I like very much that the Sheikh from Mauritania spoke, because he highlighted the idea of justice as one of the fundamental components of all religions and all cultural traditions. So monotheism of the three religions is a monotheism which brings towards the practice of justice and the work for peace. So I think we should go from the God of armies, which is a statement or an idea which is applied to God in the three religions. Both in the Hebrew Bible, the Christian Bible, and in the Quran, there are texts directly linking God with violence. Of course, within that context, but those texts cannot stand out as a rule. The text associating God with violence in the three traditions, they cannot be something imperative which would promote violence and the war against the war against the other following a crusade or a sacred war. The concept of sacred war, which is currently attributed to Islam, is a Christian medieval concept from the time of the Crusades. And I think it was the first clash of civilization and the first big sacred
Eso creo que hay que pasar del Dios
holy war which was unleashed. And also in Quran, as the Sheikh from Mauritania, one of the 99 names of God is Salam, the name of peace. And also in Christianity and in Judaism, there are many traditions in favor of peace. The second content, or the second nucleus from which an Islamic Christian tradition should be built is from mysticism and from Sufism inside Islam, because if you studied the life of Christian mystics and the life of Sufis or Muslim Sufis, you will see that it has nothing to do with that image which is very much present in religious imagery, that they are passive people, not in contact with reality. But mystics are usually subversive characters. They are against the system. They question both the religious and political systems. They are people who are not adapted to the system. They are revolutionaries. They're dangerous. They are public danger for religions and for politics and for society. Any of them. I don't know, I'm thinking right now of 2 or 3 of them from our traditions. Remember, for example, Ibn Arabi, that merchant Sufi. His life was not one of praising him by the powers. He was very much prosecuted and badly treated, even from the theological point of view. Or the great Spanish mystic, St. John of the Cross, he was in jail. His own colleagues brought him to jail because his proposals for them seemed very heterodox, and that in the best of cases. The worst lack, at least in Christianism, was carried about, was endured by women mystics in Christendom, because they are one of the most revolutionary sources of contestation. In depth, I think the one who best reflected that image of God is an atheist, is Mr. José Saramago, who's an atheist. He says that God is the silence of the universe, and man is the cry who fills with sense that silence. I don't think you can say anything else about God, because you would be irreverent. And there's an anecdote I've got with Mr. José Saramago in a conference which took place in Seville in January 2006. A year and a half ago. We were both invited to the Congress. It was celebrated in the University of Seville. The subject was the same, the Alliance of Civilization and the Dialogue in Modernity. We had our breakfast together. We came out of the Los Seises Hotel. We walked up to the university, and at 9 o'clock we were passing by the square where the Giralda Tower is, and the bell started sounding. And Mr. Jose Saramago was saying that the bells are playing because the theology is passing. And I said, well, the bells are ringing because
y convicto. Y le dije, José,
ringing because an atheist is about to be converted. And he told me that definition of God. God is the silence of the universe, and the human being is the element which fills with content the universe. And he said, well, that's one of my sentences. Well, but it's rather belonging to a Sufi than to an atheist. So it reflects very well the meeting around the idea of God. The third field where I think we can work together, both theologists, Muslim and Christian theologists, is around the ethical horizon. Ethics, together with mysticism, are the two origins or the two fundamental principles of religion. And the principle of religions, it was not dogma. At the beginning of religions, we had the good news, the experience of the meeting with God, and also the commitment of that God for the poor. I like defining ethics like the first theology, the initial theology, which is not dogmatic, that of the dogma, but is that stemming from ethics, that meeting of the person with the face of the other and solidarity with the other. And I think that both in Christianity and in Islam, ethics is one of the essential components to be found. The fourth element is the perspective of women. If there are two patriarchal religions in their organization, in their doctrine, even in their conception of God and of what is sacred, these two religions are Christianity and Islam. And nevertheless, in the origin of both religions, patriarchy was not to be found. Both at the beginning were a criticism to patriarchy. For example, in Christendom, in Christianity appeared as an egalitarian movement of men and women who walk side by side Jesus. If we are to find Peter, John, also we will find the three Marys. And during 2 centuries, the character of Mary Magdalene played a fundamental role, but with the passing of time, St. Peter was given the tiara and was given the word, the speech, and women were given the veil of submission, silence, and invisibility. And in Islam, it happened the same. Among the people who were most influential in the birth of Islam and its evolution were women, the wives of the Prophet, and then great leaders and in many different fields. So I believe that it is about time that Christians and Muslims, both female and male, work with the hermeneutics of the gender perspective in order to place women in the horizon of protagonism they had at the very beginning. And finally, I believe Islam and Christianity should work together and move in the horizon of intercultural and interreligious dialogue. And for you not to think that I want to bring things to my own backyard, I'm going to quote another thing which I think reflects this intercultural dialogue. I'm sure it is a text you all know, but let me read it, and even if you want me to write it down for you to repeat, just ask for it. It's a text from Ibn Arabi, which anticipates in 8 centuries these proposals we are making. It is a poem which is titled The Religion of Love, and it says, capable of hosting among the different forms my heart has been turned into. It's a peri for gazelle and a convent for monks, a kaaba for the pilgrim, is the tables of Torah, the planks of Torah, and the religion of love. I will follow it wherever its caravan is going to. And think of this idea, this expression that he will also quote at the different poems, saying, the most diverse beliefs are of God in the minds of people, but I follow them all. It would be seen as a scene of relativism. I believe in all beliefs. My heart got in love with the East, but it had also come to the West. My love is not due to a land, but to a lightning, and it's shining. I think that idea is also very well reflected by a Spanish poem when he says, freedom not, let's seek it together. Yours, keep it for yourself. Thank you.
Bueno, pues disculpe.
So I'm sorry if I took some time and I was not very exemplary as a Democrat, but coming from Madrid, I think it was worth talking with you. I think there's a press conference now, and we've got to leave the room. Thank you.